We'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Gary.
Here.
Grinberg.
Here.
Pepcorn.
Here.
Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here. Fargo Dome. The Fargo Dome was finished in 2018 with finished this 2018 with an operating surplus of $472,000, 7% higher than the budgeted amount last year, and that 7 is just like 7 national championships for the Bison. Oftentimes, when the Bison are winning, that's when our percentage of profit goes up. The attendance of the events and meetings at the Fargo Dome was more than 543,000 people. The direct and secondary direct economic impact generated by those attending Fargo Dome events in 2018 was nearly $40 million. So that place does pretty well. Health. The North Dakota Department of Health completed the site visit for the Fargo Cast Public Health, where their survey team focused on the clinical, financial, administrative, community education, and outreach areas of the clinic. Comments include a warm and friendly staff, quality care provided, and a clean and functional clinic. There were also comments about the amount of community outreach done by the Fargo Cast Public Health. We came out very well on that, right, Desi? Yes, very good. January is a cervical health awareness month. Nearly 13,000 women in the United States are diagnosed every year with cervical cancer. But the good news is cervical cancer can be prevented with regular screening and early detection, in addition to vaccination. Inspections. The Inspections Department and the Fargo-Moorhead Home Builders Association co-host an open house on April 11th at the Inspection Department. At the open house, citizens and contractors will have an opportunity to talk about code changes with city inspectors and see the city's new building. The event will provide casual atmosphere where the staff will be available to assist contractors in creating an account with the department's new software, and they will get a chance to see how the new software will ease permitting process. Does that increase the speed? Still takes the same amount of time?
It'll be fast.
Fast, okay. If you're a fast typer, right? Good. The library. The library has several interesting programs scheduled over the next 2 weeks while it's cold, including afternoon sessions for children on Mondays and Tuesdays, current history book club to meet Tuesday to discuss The $1 Billion Spy, a true story of Cold War espionage and betrayal by David Hoffman. A Discovery Play session for children ages 4 to 2 years is set for January 31st, and Project English meets Tuesday evenings, and beginner yoga for adults is held almost every Wednesday and Thursday evening. And Tim, that doesn't matter about the wind chill? They can come do yoga? Okay. Police. The police held its annual awards ceremony for personnel where officers nominate each other for awards recognizing amazing acts of courage and selflessness in their service to protect the community. Officer Dan Bear was named the Officer of the Year, which is a well-deserved honor. That was a well-attended event too. Yes. The police department has released a new recruiting video on its Facebook page. Chief Todd said a lot of work went into making the video, and he hoped it translates into attracting the best people to work with the best people. It's a pretty exciting video, Chief. I don't know. I'm not going to let my son see it. Due to Fargo's ability to withstand turbulence in the national economy, the state's low unemployment rate, and Fargo's strong educational workforce, Livability.com has placed Fargo #3 on the list of the most recession-proof cities in the United States. The article also stated Fargo is a great place to live with the under-the-radar cool factor that the rest of the country is just now learning to discover. In the list, Lincoln was #1, Wichita, beginning with Texas, since Victoria, Texas took #4. And an interesting announcement tonight. Tonight is our last City Commission meeting in these chambers. The new chambers in New City Hall will host its first City Commission meeting on Monday, February 11th. The room was added with a major civic auditorium and City Hall expansion. Excuse me, this room was added when they expanded Civic Hall and expansion in 2001 and was completed in 2004. So this room has served almost 15 years for the City Commission. These chambers hold many memories for me, especially when it was renamed the War Room. through to the 209 flood. Standing here every day on Monday through Friday, or actually all the way through the flood, we used to meet with all the staff and a variety of different guests. And always the time we did that, we'd always wear a yellow vest. And I remember all the people who used to come, and what they usually like to go away with is a yellow vest to know they were part of our flood fight. Thank you. There's a lot of floods there. We'll go to our regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the order of agenda, moving item 10 from the consent agenda to the regular agenda and adding an item to provide snow removal update by Ben Dow?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of January 14, 2019 regular meeting?
So move. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda 1 through 31, excluding item 10, which have been moved to the regular agenda?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Strand,
Yes.
Gehrig,
Yes.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Item 32, request from Lake Bold Liquors. Steve Sprague to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This is kind of an unusual item to come in before you. A little bit of history before we kind of get started here. So Lake Bold Liquors was initiated about 12 years ago at the request of Jody Plusity. It was the first B Limited that was set up. The B Limited license was established to allow new businesses to come into the market. It's an off-sale only license. So a little while ago, about a year ago or so, Jody decided she wanted to move in a different direction in her life, and so she reached out to Hornbachers, which is right down the strip mall from them, and tried to see if they could come to an agreement. They did come to an agreement, and in October of last year, came before the City Commission with a request to transfer the license from Lake Bold Liquors to Hornbachers. That was approved by the City Commission. Subsequent to that time, the agreement was never consummated. They never closed the deal. And then before they could do that, Coburn's purchased the Hornbachers. And so we ended up with kind of an unusual situation where we have an agreement with a licensee to sell to one company, and then it was purchased by another. We have a part of our B Limited license says that the no licensee can hold more than one B Limited license. And so the Coburn's, which is Cashwise, has a B Limited license already at their 52nd Avenue South location. And so now we're kind of stuck in a position where they have one B Limited license. The ordinance says that you can't have a second one, and then they're working on negotiations with the other with the Hornbachers location. So I don't know if I've maybe just confused you even more than anything, but so Jody came to the Liquor Control Board and requested a variance or a waiver of that ordinance. The Liquor Control Board referred it to Nancy Morris to see whether or not we could do a waiver. Nancy looked into the situation and said that a waiver is not allowed under those ordinances. And so under 25-1506, it clearly states that no licensee can hold more than one liquor license or one B Limited license, and that a waiver provision is not allowed. I guess that's the background that I have on this, and I don't know.
So the only motion is that she handed out a sheet today, basically would be to direct her to revise it, so you could have an additional B1 license, right?
I haven't seen the motion.
Oh, it's on top of our sheet here. Nancy, maybe you can explain.
So I can just follow up that the law as it is presently written is one B Limited per
license holder. So there is not an opportunity for a B license unless you change the ordinance to address the situation, that Coburn's would then be eligible to hold more than one B limited license. As I understand it, there is also a B limited license that is presently available. The B limiteds are based on population, so there is a possible likelihood that another individual who has a B limited would also seek another B limited license. Again, the ordinance is that only one B limited license can be held presently by any license holder.
Mr. Chair, so I just have a couple things. First of all, I want to thank the staff for trying, I mean, obviously we felt very sorry for her. It's none of her doing, but I have some trepidation about this because it's like we're changing a policy to solve an issue for one person, and I guess that's what concerns me. I feel sorry for her, but I just don't know if this is correct, because we're basically changing this policy, and now it'll go from, and these we're set up for a reason to just have one owner. This was the intention behind the original thing, and so for us to change this to help her, we're also changing the policy for the whole city. So I guess that's my main concern. So that's my comments.
And to answer that concern, we do have a B limited license on the shelf that nobody's come forth and gotten. The attempt was to have other buyers get into the B limited license, and you presently have one that sits on the shelf that nobody's utilized. So it does offer an opportunity if somebody wanted to do that. Commissioner Garrick.
How long has the B limited been available and not being used? The one on the shelf, as it were.
Probably 7 years, as long as she's had hers.
No, we've issued a couple, two B limiteds. One went to Coburn's, to Cashwise on 5th, 2nd South. The other one went to Staymart Liquor on 12th Avenue North. So we have issued a couple of them. The one that's on the shelf was originally approved to be issued to Hornbachers at Village West, and then they gave that back so that they could move forward with this one with Jody down at Lake Mode.
So when was the B limited created, I guess is what I'm getting at.
When was that classification first created? It was 12 years ago.
So, I mean, we had a certain number, maybe it went up one because of population, to the mayor's point. It's just been sitting there. And I think it'd be beneficial. I think it's kind of arbitrary to say they can't have more than one. If it's not being used, let it be used. So I'm supportive of allowing this to happen. It's no one's fault. There's nothing underhanded going on here. And I think that if we change the policy to allow someone to actually utilize the license, it probably would sell, and that's more business, and that's more of what people want in the market. So we'll let the market decide where these go.
Mr. Greenberg.
Just a comment, both Commissioner Pepcorn and Garrick on the liquor control, your expertise, and appreciate your perspectives. I have a question maybe for Nancy or Eric. Nancy's got it. So this is somewhat unique, obviously, and I've met with Jody and, figure out how we can do the right thing to get her out of her desired business. Is it possible to set a window, like a sunset? This ordinance is adopted, and then at sunsets it goes away, so it just addresses this one issue?
I suppose that it is. I mean, I think what you are doing, I understand Commissioner's Pepcorn comment here, is you are changing the existing law to address a particular situation. That particular situation could be limited for a period of time. So if somebody else that has a B limited license could also come in and apply for the available B limited license. At that point, there aren't any other B limited licenses available if that one is taken, which would essentially remedy the problem as well, until the B license becomes available again based on population, and then an individual with a B limited license could then apply for that B limited as well.
Well, Mr. Chairman, and both Commissioner Garrick and Pepcorn, it wouldn't be my intention to make any motions. I'll throw that out as a question. If that's something that makes this more palatable and there's other review coming, and just throw it as an option. I'll look to you, too, for your role on the board.
Nancy, one of the questions is, can you make an exception? So you don't want to do a waiver, but could you just, under this circumstance, we would allow it. Can't the commission make exceptions?
Well, under this situation, it is Coburn's who would be applying for the license that would be available. And I don't see any reason to hold them in a different position than any other B Limited license holder presently. The exception would be for Jody, but actually what's happening here is she is selling the goods and her goodwill with that business. The license comes back to the city. The ordinance provides that whoever buys a going concern has a preference to that license and still has to comply with all of the other application procedures available, 1506 for that license. So again, you'd be looking at Coburn's application and whether to grant Coburn's that exception. And I don't see a basis for an exception under the circumstances. I think it would require a change in the law.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my only concern would be, and my heart goes out with the applicant, but I just don't want to see any unintended consequences. And I'm not sure what they would be. Steve or Nancy, do you know what concerns we'd be if we went down this path policy-wise?
It would just be a change in the policy. Presently, only one B Limited license can be held by a license holder. I would anticipate that there are other B Limited license holders that would seek a B Limited license that is available. So you'd have more than one person owning the B Limited, and they would be owning those off-sale
Mr. Pipcorn.
businesses.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so this is when we miss Gary, our historian on liquor control, because I just want to give you, one of the reasons that the B, and this is a little bit before my time too, but it was, the A licenses are, a lot of them are held by a few people. And so the B licenses, it was specifically worded this way, so that didn't happen. Do you know what I mean? And so that's my concern about this, is that the precedent that this sets, you know, if we can sunset it or something like that, to me, it still seems like we're changing the policy to fit this problem, and I'm not sure. But I will say, and Eric was there, but Gary was awesome, because he had been on it for, since Fargo was, I think, started as a city, and so he was awesome. But
Since Gainsborough was a yearling, I think was the expression he would use.
But do you get what I'm saying, John? These Bs were supposed to be separate because that was an issue, and so that's kind of why they were created. All right, sorry to ramble on, but that's the.
Well, no, but what you're partially trying to solve is some of the owners in town have a bar and then they buy another bar. It particularly came up with the Vinyl Taco or JL Beers, and I think you guys are trying to solve a problem, but then I think you had a limit on how many licenses we could have in the community, and so you came up with the B Limited to help with the population growth, hoping some other owners would come in. But even in this one, Colburn's inadvertently, cash-wise, has got a B license, and they bought a B Limited license already for the cash-wise down south. So in some ways, that's still happening, that people who own bars are buying some more off-sale. So I don't know that we've changed that venue, but she has a problem because she has no other buyer. So the difficulty in this one, there's no other, she's gone to Happy Harry's, they already have a liquor shop down south there, and the other buyers that might buy it have no interest in it because it's a competitor, basically. So here you have somebody who's stuck with the business that if we would have done this last fall, we wouldn't even have this discussion because she sold the super value. But now because the corporates are doing so well, somebody else bought super value, she's stuck. So the real question is there anything we can do so this sale can go through? And the suggested motion is there. If somebody wants to do a sunset, you could do that.
Can I ask, Mr. Chair, can I ask, so what would the sunset, is there a, what's the time frame? Because to me, I would not support this unless there's a sunset, because I think the precedent is going to be, then somebody else is going to say, well, what about me? Or what about, there's going to be that will not stop. And so what is your view on a sunset type of thing? What would that be? Like, is it 3 months or what?
I will say I don't know that I have a view on a sunset. I mean, you're changing it for a limited situation. I would think that there would be people that would have a similar situation that would come in and say, well, that's not fair. You know, they're at a disadvantage by the change of the law and not able to add, you know, ask for that same compensation. Now, again, is there? I'm not sure of why there was only one B Limited license per person. That came into effect well before my time. And as the mayor mentioned, there are circumstances in which other license holders have B limited, and they also have a number of B licenses. The difference between those, they're based on population, they're on off sales. The B limited is one that returns to the city if they change operations. And then the city then can reissue that license with a fee, where the B doesn't, that doesn't happen. So the ordinance does not prevent a holder of a B limited license from holding a B license. And there are entities that have that. So again, it's whether or not one B limited license is supported under the ordinances, but that's the way it
Commissioner
reads
Gary.
presently.
So the intent was touched upon, I think, and I think we should touch it again, that we wanted to create a license so that new people could enter the market, because we saw a trend of the same people getting more and more licenses. So we did that for 12 years, and we still have some of them that are on the shelf. So I think that demand has been shown, has been fulfilled, and now we have licenses still available. Ultimately, well, that's one thing, but ultimately, a separate point is, why do we limit them? If you have multiple liquor stores that line up next to each other, they cannot survive. That's why some people won't buy this liquor store, because they don't think, oh, there's enough demand there. So limiting these licenses, I think, in the first place is arbitrary, because the market will limit them themselves, because they can't be sustained if there's too many of them. So that's why I think that changing this ordinance now, 12 years after it first began, is prudent, because there are licenses still available. Newcomers have not stepped up into the market and said, I want to do this. So now we can change the intent 12 years later to say, okay, if let's fulfill this license, and then if we want to create a different license down the road to do something similar, we can certainly do that.
Mr. Strand.
Nancy or Steve, just, is there any value to saying you can't hold more than two? Versus that, I don't know, I'm just,
Yeah, that's certainly an option, that you could limit it to no more than 2 B limited licenses for any one entity that has a 5% interest in another entity, or something that does address this issue, and there was one other available. As that population becomes available, it may be purchased by somebody that already has a B limited license.
Mayor, I'll make the recommended motion with the modification that they can't hold more than 2 B limited licenses.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moving and seconded. Further discussion? Roll call vote.
Strand,
Yes.
Gary.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mahoney. Grinberg.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Moving
It
ahead.
best confuses you, I can tell.
We will go to public hearings. Transfer of Class H alcoholic beverage license Pizza Boys Fargo, doing business at Uncle Mario's Pizza Joint, to Pippa's Pizza Joint, Uncle Mario's Pizza at 45th Street South Suite 2. Steve can explain it better than I did.
Well, this one's a lot cleaner than the previous issue. This is simply a business that's going to change hands. They're changing the liquor license. We've gone through our background check. Everything came back very, very nice, very clean, and it does come to you with a recommendation of approval.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this transfer of this alcoholic beverage license? Is there anyone who wishes to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearings. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Gary.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Golden Valley Second Edition, 6737 25th Street South. Approval recommended by the Planning Commission on 7/3/18. Zoning change from agricultural to single-dwelling residential and public and institutional with conditional overlay. First reading of the rezoning ordinance and plat of the Golden Valley Second Edition. Donald Crest to explain.
Good evening, Commissioners. Donald Crest with the Department of Planning and Development. As the mayor has stated, item 33B is a major plat and zone change for the Golden Valley Second Edition. Just to locate you here, this is 25th Street South, 70th Avenue South, of course, Davies High School here, the Golden Valley First Edition here, and though it's too recent to appear on this map, the recently approved Madeline's Meadows plat is right down here. And then Drain 53 is off the edge over here. The 10-acre property is unplatted and zoned agricultural. See the agricultural zoning there is the gray. The plat will create 33 single-dwelling lots zoned SR4 and 1 private park lot, which is this one over here, that will be owned and maintained by the homeowners association, the HOA. They will also maintain some of the landscape easements. There is a conditional overlay on that park that's zoned public and institutional, PI. We use that conditional overlay to restrict uses to ones that would be appropriate for a single-dwelling residential neighborhood like this. Those uses are parks and detention facilities. Those would be stormwater detention facilities, because there are many, as you see in your staff report there are many other uses that would be available in a PI zone that would not be appropriate in this area. So it's just to keep that focused on being a park and a green space and an open area. As this plat does include the lot and landscape easements to be maintained by the HOA, the city has standard wording that the developer must insert into his conditions, covenants, and restrictions, the CC&Rs, for his homeowners association. We have forwarded those. Those were created by our city attorney, Mr. Johnson. We forwarded those to the applicant. He reviewed them, included in his CC&Rs, and he has sent those to us for review. That language is in there to account for what might happen if, for instance, the HOA would fail or go out of business, how the responsibility for acquiring money to pay taxes and to maintain that HOA lot would be done. That is a private park. The City of Fargo Parks District does not own it, so it's a private park. Also included in your master plan, in your packet rather, is a master plan showing how this whole area of the Golden Valley area here west of 25th could be developed in the future. Again, staff has been working with on the applicant with this for some years, actually, on how this could be laid out and developed. And this is just a general idea of what the future could hold here. This is not an entitlement you are voting on here tonight, but just to give an idea of what the developer has in mind for this project. Your packet also includes, of course, a zone change ordinance prepared by the city attorney's office. We'll note just something a little different here, that the applicant on his own, the developer, Eagle Ridge Development, did hold a public meeting with the adjacent neighbors to the south early on in this process back in September. And Mr. John Eunice of Eagle Ridge Development is here this evening if you wish to ask him about that. Staff did not go to that, so that was just something he organized on his own. The Planning Commission's recommendation is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this zoning change? Anyone present who wishes to speak? We'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Gary,
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye.
I'm looking forward to the new chambers.
Thank you. Recommendation for Tax Exempt Review Committee to approve the City of Fargo Tax Exempt Review Committee policy and guidelines. Jim Gilmore to speak.
Thank you. I think it was about 18 months ago you asked us to work on the new TIF policy, and we've been working on it ever since. Commissioner Pepcorn has chaired the Tax Exempt Review Committee. We spent a lot of meetings on it, tried to solicit a lot of public input and gotten a lot of information from developers. Also, Ben Hushka has worked with me on these rewrites and helping keep track of what we had before, and it just provides staff support for that committee. So these recommendations, guidelines, one of the things we did was we pulled into our current tax exempt policy all the TIF policy and all the policy related to the university mixed-use zoning. So now we'll have one policy book, and in addition, we'll just have one committee. The TIF request before it often gone through the finance committee. This will consolidate that review with the tax exempt committee. So if someone's trying to use both programs, they can look at it at one time. And then I think if we ever have a Renaissance zone application, we would kind of also coordinate with that committee. The Renaissance zone legislation is a little more unique. What I thought I'd go through tonight is just in part give you an overview of the the policies that we have, what's changed and what hasn't changed. I'm going to pass this out now. I'll be referring to this in one of my slides, and it's difficult to read on the screen, and so it's just some information on TIF districts that have closed out over the past several years. First of all, maybe talk about the different types of tax exemptions that are kind of covered by this policy. We have new industry and pilot application or projects. Currently, there's about $203 million in value under that program. The next largest is the residential new construction. We're not proposing any changes to that particular policy. The Renaissance zone is covered by a separate policy, $53 million. There's a remodeling exemption. If you look at every one of your agendas, you'll see remodeling tax exemptions on those. And then we have one where it's a tax increment financing exemption, which works very much like a pilot, but it's under a different section of the law. So overall, there's $405 million in exempt property. Of the ones that are pilot, there are three different types. One has to do with new industry and jobs, where our focus is on job creation, bringing in new wealth into the community, new primary sector jobs. The second type is for housing. This is more of a market housing for projects either in the downtown or up in the NDSU area, in the university mixed-use zoning area. And then finally, there's low-income housing tax exemptions. Those are applied to the, or usually using concert with the low-income housing tax credit programs. Now, of the pilot ones, those properties aren't 100% exempt. As part of that review, we usually require a portion of the property taxes to be paid. And so if, even though there's $200 million exempt, they're making pilot payments as if they were worth $82 million. So really the net decrease is $121 million as far as the actual impact on the overall property tax collections. So in summary, of all these tax exemptions, and this is not including the traditional TIF districts, our total value in Fargo is about $12 billion. The value of those exempt properties is $323 million, so we're at about 2.5% of the property is exempt, and so that's the overall kind of impact on the city. Just included this slide, it's from another presentation, but wanted to point out again how the Renaissance Zone program has boosted property values in downtown. There's been other programs too, but we've seen the downtown value over the last 20 years increase from $200 million to over $600 million, which creates more property tax base in the community. So the overall purposes of the TIF are, first of all, I think there are two main purposes. One is to eliminate blight with new development. The other is to increase the property tax base. It's not really focused on job creation or primary sector job creation. Sometimes that comes along with it, but the main focus is on redevelopment. But occasionally the primary sector jobs are also part of that, those districts. I want to give you some examples of districts that we've had in the past, and some of these are on the sheet there. One is a stop-and-go center. This project was just a gas station, an older office building, and an older apartment building in 2006. Had a value of $1.4 million. We provided an incentive to the developer. It's now worth $15 million. On this particular one, there's the current debt on this is $275,000. They'll be, we're generating $191,000 a year. So over the next 2 years, this TIF district will mature and the full property will come onto the property tax basis. Another one, this is the East Bridge Apartments. The air photos from 2005, actually the TIF district started a couple years later than that. This one, as you on the sheet, it went actually only about 5 years, was pre-project value is $488,000. Today it's worth 5.1 million, so this generates for the taxing jurisdiction $62,000 more than if it would have stayed at that same value. And so you see different types of projects too. This is a mixed-use development. This is a housing. This is more of an industrial TIF out in the corner of Main Avenue and I-29. That's what it looked like in 2015. Had a value of about $2 million. Today the value is at $13 million, and when this expires in 15 years, there'd be another $154,000 in property taxes. This is a small TIF up near NDSU. Again, some older houses were converted into an apartment building. Went from $500,000 to $2.4 million. This one can run 15 years at the most. So the fundamental work that we have here, maybe the fundamental philosophy, is that we're really trying to encourage desirable development that would not otherwise occur but for the assistance of the TIF. And so that's why there's this financial review that's included in the policy. So again, and then also we're trying to assist with extraordinary costs, so things like demolition, utilities, land acquisition. We're not trying to help pay for part of the new structure. And the TIF notes, the city doesn't actually give a developer any money. We just promise to pay future property taxes, and it's limited to 15 years. So there's no risk to the city of having to put out money in these, for most of these. And then also we're checking at financial need to see that they actually need the level of assistance that they've requested. I pass out this. This shows some closeout TIF districts. They varied anywhere from 5 years to 23 years in length. Of these particular 6 TIF districts, they had a value at the start of $3.6 million. When they closed, they had the value of $61 million more. So it was a 17 times increase in the value of these particular properties. I'll go over the policy changes. These are just kind of a summary. I think it hit the most important points of what you'll see in here that's different. First of all, the previous policy really didn't apply to the downtown. We had a policy that looked at how we did TIF districts outside of the downtown. We hadn't really gotten specific about what we would and wouldn't do downtown. In some ways, we left ourselves complete flexibility that way, but this particular policy now also applies to the downtown. Secondly, there are review criteria in the policy, kind of different types of projects. There's different types of review criteria. We have one for housing, one for commercial development, and one for sort of a downtown or mixed-use development. There's distinction in the policy between when the developer requests a TIF district and also when the city may initiate a TIF district. So if the city has in the past initiated and started a TIF district to create a parking garage downtown, that really didn't come from the developers. In other cases, we have developers come in and say, we want to do this project and we need some assistance from the TIF program. And so there's distinction there. When it's developer requested assistance, our maximum term will be 15 years. When the city is initiating a project, we would look at going up to the 25 years allowed by the North Dakota Century Code. There's financial review for all developer assistance, and again, the Tax Exempt Committee will review all pilot and TIF applications. Just some other information on the pilot program, because we have recommended some changes in here, not only under the TIF, but under the pilot. But when we use a pilot, there's kind of 3 main purposes. One is job creation type projects. We have a criteria for that. That changed very little. Then we have new housing, both in the downtown and NDSU, where it's more of a market rate housing, and then support for lower income housing. In the pilot, primary sector businesses, generally those are 5 years. In the downtown, we've been trying to encourage new housing. Here's how the policy is different with the pilot in the downtown. The previous policy over the past 20 years has been to provide 100% property tax exemption for 5 years, followed by a 75% exemption for the next 5 years. The new policy also requires a financial review that was not required previously, but it does allow us to go out to 15 years provided the developer shows it's needed. Still, the first 5 years would be limited to 100%, but the rest would be based on a financial review capped at 15 years. The other changes that would not, there'd be no reduction in the current value. So if they were tearing down a couple $300,000 houses, you know, they would, that value would stay. They would not have an exemption for kind of taking the value below what it had been previously. Pilot for low-income housing. Previously, the policy was to require some payment based on the percentage of rents. For projects that have the low-income housing tax credits, the ones that are more valuable, we'd probably still use that policy. But the new policy allows for up to 100% exemption for 20 years. However, that's based on a financial review. We've been finding it's really difficult to get low-income housing in the community, and this at least says the cities be willing to consider an application where we wouldn't receive any property taxes for 20 years if they genuinely need that to get low-income housing. You know, I don't think this alone is going to bring in a lot of low-income housing, but it could be an important tool towards on certain housing projects. The pilot in the NDSU area, this didn't change much. This is to encourage new housing in that university mixed use. It still requires a financial need, and it's limited to a maximum of 10 years, so that's not changed. Probably just other notes, we noted in the policy, our goal is to keep this policy in place through June of 2020. We know there'll be an election then, there could be a change on the commission, and so they want to give some certainty to developers that the intent at least is to not change the policy between now and then. Again, the criteria for job creation and retention projects is unchanged. No changes to the new housing, remodeling, exemptions, and the fees will be something I'll bring to you later. Those will be set by schedule. That way, there's a little easier to change those without having to amend the full policy. That was a recommendation of one of our financial advisors. If that concludes the information, Dave, I don't know if you want to make any comments on this or
Sure.
open it to questions.
Just a couple of quick things. One of them was, so Commissioner Gary and I think others were concerned about the clawback, the ability to have us be able to get, you know, if somebody says they're going to do something like jobs or something like that and they don't do it. In the past, we weren't specific about what we can do, and now that will be included in there where we can review, and if they don't do what they promise, then we have the ability to do that, and I think that's an important thing. And I think the affordable housing aspect of it, I think that's good, and I think there's some people from the Roosevelt neighborhood that I think you want to make sure to be specific and say it's in the UMU district, not in their district, and so I think there were a lot of them that were concerned that that was going to be the case too. So, but I do think, and Commissioner Strand, and I agree with him, that the affordable housing, especially in the downtown, has to be something that we focus on, because if we don't make an effort, it'll be harder and harder to have the lower cost rents in the downtown, just because the price of property has gone up, which is a good thing from some of the things that went on in the past. So, and I would say it's been 18 months and we've had lots of opportunities for public input. We've had developers, we've had the public welcome at all of our meetings, and the one thing I will say, so John was a little concerned when he came in today and about voting on it today, and if you want to delay this, that's fine with me, but I want to make sure that if we do, that we have a reason for it. Do you know what I mean? That because this is just my opinion, we've had lots of opportunities and we've gotten lots of good input and we've made lots of, but if you think that we need more time for more public input, that is fine with me. That's just that's my opinion. That's the end of my comments, and I want to thank Jim. I wish I could show you the red line copy versus the current copy, because there was many changes that went on, and I think we made a lot of good, positive progress. I think we incorporated ideas, from all the different groups, and so I think it's good. It's not perfect, and I do think it will be kind of a work in progress, even though, Tony wanted it every 2 years, and it's amazing how fast 2 years go, so that's a good thing too. All right, that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Pepcorn. And, my sense is that I have a lot of questions I'd just like to talk through. And this format of bringing it to an action item tonight doesn't allow us much room to just talk it through. I'd like to go through the policies, and I'd like to have you educate us, because not all of us are on your tax exempt review committee and have seen the process of all these meetings unfold and the public engagements and so on. So that's kind of where my head is if, in fact, I wouldn't mind a brown bag, where we just have us look at the policies that existed and be able to, in a loose environment, ask our questions, because I have so many questions about affordability. And I don't want to vote this down just based on my notion that I have all these questions that I need to answer. And how is it other cities do it? How is it they have affordability built into their incentive programs? How is it we don't? Why can't we? What could we do? And that's where I'm at. I know that there's low-income housing tax credits, but folks, that's limited by population. That's not a big player like we'd like it to be. So it's market rate housing and affordable housing and workforce housing. And I'm not so sure. I'd like to know, and I know workforce development is just one of our highest priorities in our community, and I'm not so sure or not that this policy proposal coming forward addresses the community's needs or options for workforce housing the best we can or not. I just don't know. So that's my thinking, is if you folks would be open to it, and us having a brown bag or us having a conversation in a casual environment, then we bring it back for a vote, because I'd like to drill deep into some of these specific policies.
So Mr. Chair, the other thing we can do is, this is a policy, and if there's things that you want to make it changes to the policy, we can do that too. That's the other thing. I mean, this is not going to be carved in stone, and then we're not changing it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I hope you look at it that way too. So, all right, thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Garrick.
So there are a couple of things I really like. The clawback that you're talking about, that's great. We've talked about that for years. The base value, tearing down the houses to get a lower base value, that was something that needed to change as well. So obviously there's some things that are positive changes in here. I look at the new policy, and like John, I have a lot of questions still, and I don't feel like I understand it 100% like I should, after receiving it on Thursday when I was out of town. It seems like there's an expansion of incentives with this new policy. And the reason, just one example is with the pilots. It used to be 100% for 5 years, 75% for 5 years, and that was kind of the max. Now we're going with 100% for 5 years, 90% for 10 years. And just the obvious question of why, like how did that come about? And where my mind goes is that, as we've seen in the past, as development happens, as things cost more, because the values are going up in the downtown and other places, you need to add more and more incentives to get that same return on investment that we're getting. That's why I always say, or I have been saying for years, I'm afraid of a bubble. And if we have to keep increasing the amount of incentives, at some point we're going to be offering 100% for 20 years for a pilot just to get the same bang for the buck that we're getting today. And then where do you go from there? In 20 years, do you have to pay them actual cash to make them do these things? So I'm afraid that we're expanding incentives when we should be starting to retract incentives and let the market level out, let downtown find out where its natural place is, because I don't want to see empty storefronts when we can no longer offer higher and higher incentives. It also concerns me that we still, in the policy, it still says we're not eligible for incentives for things like offices, healthcare, hospitality, which is hotels, general office space, professional buildings like doctors and dentists and lawyers. We gave incentives to a dentist's office just recently. And so are we still following the guidance? I think that blurb is in there, but I think that there's also things inside the guidance elsewhere that contradicts that. We're also moving from a broadly based notion of trying to create jobs in the private sector, which Tony Grimberg talks about a lot. We've moved away from that now and said, well, now we're talking more about development and redevelopment. Well, that's expansive. That could be anything. Tearing down anything and putting something new on top of that is development, which is a dramatic move away from the idea of creating jobs. Low-income housing, yes, there's a 20-year incentive for 100% for a low-income property. But what about these large buildings that are these large compounds with 95 beds, and none of it is low income, and we're giving them large incentives to do that. So I think that low-income component needs to be interjected into the projects that are receiving the incentives, if they are to receive the incentives, not a separate 20-year incentive for 100% for just a low-income project. So those are some of the things I'm concerned with. I agree with John. I'd like to sit down and talk to you guys and find out where these ideas all came from. It was a long process, and obviously I didn't make all those meetings. So I'm with John on hoping for a brown bag.
One of the things that's happened is we brought taxes down, so the ability to do it in 5 years, or 5 and then 5 to 10 years at 75 doesn't always work, although most of the TIFs we've had don't have 90%. They usually are lesser than that. But the tax rate effective went from 2.2 to 1.2. That difference doesn't allow the developer to make back what they want. So it is hard, and you're very right. It's just difficult for the feedback or the money to come back into the developer to make it worth their while. But we are competing against a lot of places around the country, and I think that's one of the things we take into account is that there's a group of investors in the Fargo area that are looking at Omaha, they're looking at 4 other cities, and their decision on that sometimes will be how we blend our incentives to have them stay here. So I think what the two of you are requesting is perhaps to table it for 2 weeks or a month and then bring it back and then have some brown bag. Is that what I'm sensing here? Dave, is that, or do you want to pass it, or what?
So, Mr. Chair, the main thing is I want everybody to feel comfortable because this is a big decision, and if you feel like, and I totally, from your perspective, so we've been working on it every day, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Not every day, but on a regular basis versus you're seeing it now and thinking, well, where's it all coming from? So if that would make, I would, instead of having a brown bag, I would much rather have you, if we could meet just informally, like each one commissioner with me or something like that, because I think then, or whatever works. But I want you guys to all feel comfortable because this is a big deal and it's very important. And it's not going to hurt my feelings if we absolutely don't vote on it tonight. That's what I'm trying to say. Thanks.
Commissioner Grinberg.
Well, my 2 cents, I agree with everything that's been said. I just hope we don't kick this down the road too far and get into spring when construction season. So I would hope that whether it's a brown bag or Commissioner Pepcorn, maybe it's sitting down and just talking it through so we're ready to vote in 2 weeks. So that, we declare it and move forward. I just hate to see it go another 4 or 6 weeks because we can't get together for a brown bag. And I know schedules are going to be very challenging in the month of February for some of us.
Legislatively, we're really busy. Mr. Strand.
And I'm wondering if the legislature will be doing anything that will affect any of these policies or not in the interim. But again, I want to focus in on affordable housing. I want to focus in on the notion if somebody's coming to the public trough for public assistance, what does the general public get out of it or not? And that's where I want, and I'm not saying I know all the answers, but I want to know how is it other cities do it and why can't we? And what I see in here generally is our limit of housing. It says that, well, you can't charge more than 50% of market rate. Well, that's not affordable housing in my mind. If you can't charge more than 50% more than the market rate and you're getting public assistance to build that building, that's what I want to hone in on. Because, and the other side of this that I want to get a balance of is, well, where are we aiming? What's the vacancy rate realistically? What's the vacancy rate going to be? What are the impacts on private individual housing ownership opportunities versus apartments? That's where I want to aim. I want to get to a policy where I can vote for it. And I have a predisposition that I'm not generally in favor of tax incentives for private market housing developments. So I want to get over that hurdle, or at least understand it enough that I really got my arms around it.
Mr. Chairman, just
No motion, Commissioner Grinberg.
just to add to Commissioner Strand's comments, and we've studied this topic, we've attended conferences, and recently Commissioner Pepcorn and I were in Atlanta at the International Economic Development Council and the subject of affordable housing. have not been able to find one definition of what is affordable housing. Low income is a different discussion. And so I think we have to be careful, what is affordable housing, because it's different to you, 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 and you, and you. And so we have to figure out how that fits, and I get your point, but I don't think we'll ever get there as far as defining what affordable housing is. Just a comment.
Mr. Strand?
Thank you, and that's such a good point. Affordability is relative to wherever you're at on your spectrum of income, but I think we should start using the word workforce housing more. You know, to me, that'll help us hone in on the growing needs of our workforce coming our way. When the diversion starts, what will the workforce demands be? You know, to me, that's just going to be hitting us hard, is workforce housing. And if we can make this be workforce housing and have the incentives designed for workforce housing, that's a whole different approach in my mind than just market housing.
Mr. Chair, just one more thing. But the other thing is, John, it's way more complicated than just our policy. So affordable senior housing, well, that's the Fargo Housing Authority. So we have to start working with a lot more of these other government entities in Fargo. That's what I've learned from this, that it's really, we're a piece of it. And so we need to, and that's actually what we've learned. We need to be more all on the same page, and right now we haven't been doing that as well as we should have. And I'm sure you already know this, but every low-income senior housing project that they open in Fargo, it's fully full before it gets completed. And so that tells you we have something there that we need to address.
So it might be workforce housing, retirement housing as well.
Exactly.
National Conference of Mayors was talking about this, John, and the workforce right now, 5% is blue collar. Almost 50% of the workforce right now is service industry. So when you're talking about workforce, you know, thinking about the diversion, you got to also think about the service industry that services many parts of the community. We're one of the top 10 cities in the nation for millennials to come into because it's affordable salary with affordable housing. So there's a lot of different concepts we have to figure out, because some people think Fargo is a great place to come and the rents are affordable. So but to Grinberg's thought is we need to define what you're looking for, because low income is one thing totally different. And if you want, we're going to have 5,000 people move downtown. We got to find housing for them. You'd have to build 400 apartments at least a year to start to take care of that. So you're going to have to look at a variety of things to stimulate downtown development. But could I have a motion on the Tax Exempt Review Committee's recommendation tonight so we can move forward?
I'll make a motion to approve the new policy.
Is there a second?
I thought we were going to table. Is that what the motion is? Or is it?
No, he moved the motion. I suppose you could second on the table.
Second.
There is a second. Mr. Strand.
Mayor, I move to table this until a month from now, and with the intent, with us to try schedule a brown bag in the meantime, especially for those of us not on the Tax Exempt Review Committee.
Commissioner Gregg, you had something?
Second, but didn't Tony Grinberg second Dave's motion?
Yep.
This is an amendment.
Okay, second.
Or table.
Table.
I think the rules are, John, we have to vote on that.
Yep.
Need a second?
Gregg seconded the second to table it for 1 month.
Just I'm going to declare I'm going to be out of the country in a month from now, so if my vote is needed, I may or may not be able to call in.
I'd rather have us have the flexibility all 5 commissioners are able to attend.
Want to say 2 weeks or 6 weeks?
Commissioner Garrick's going too, aren't you?
No, I'll be in town.
Okay.
Okay, roll call on the table motion to 1 month.
Strand,
Yes.
Gehrig.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. So that rules. We're done with that one.
Mayor, one more thought. Maybe what we might do is with you, Commissioner Pepcorn, and the committee or whomever, is if maybe we kind of help sort out what our questions are going into that. So if we have a general area of focus, so you're not surprised at that discussion,
That would be very helpful.
you know, so if we have questions that we at least
Why
kind
don't you
of,
contact Gilmore and give him the questions free so you
So,
should have them already.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a suggestion? So if that's okay, before we do that, if it's okay, that Jim and I and each of you could meet
Absolutely.
with your specific questions, if that's okay.
We'd have to do it in public, though, because you can't meet with all of us.
You can meet with you individually.
That'd be
or-
a chain meeting.
Oh,
It's all the same
yeah,
issue.
right.
I mean, I like the idea, it's just we can't do it one-on-one. We have to tell them that we're doing it, we could sit in here, if they want to come listen to us chat, they can listen to us chat, I guess, you know?
So whatever, or we could do it one-on-one, so I'll leave that up to you, but I do think it would be, and we could even have the finance, we could maybe have Kent there and maybe Bruce or Mike to, if, whatever works, I think that'd be a good idea, if that's okay with you.
So Jim Gilmore, I tasked you to work it out, however they do it, not to violate open meeting laws and get the people in the room that need to be at the room so everybody gets their questions answered. Is that okay?
I'd have it done in 2 weeks.
Item 10, purchase service agreement for the North Dakota Department of Health for targeted testing for TB infection and treatment of that.
I move approval.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So this is item 10 on
Mr.
the
Pepcorn.
consent. So I just wanted to bring up, so on Friday, and if anybody saw the news, there was a breakout of tuberculosis in Mankato. And so that's in our area, that's a legitimate concern. And if somebody thinks that's not going to happen in Fargo, then at our last meeting, I had a call from a nurse at Sanford, and I don't have my notes with me, but there was an exposure of tuberculosis at Sanford, where a doctor and several nurses then had to go through the procedure. So that concerns me. It happens in Fargo, and so I don't know how it is, but I think we should at least know when this happens. I mean, that is it's a serious issue. So that's just my comments. Thank you.
And this is money from the state, so we test people for TB and then treat the people that need to be treated. So this is preventive medicine is what we're introducing. Roll call, or Commissioner Strand?
Just a thought, and you know, this is a delicate topic, Commissioner Pepcorn, and if we can talk health issues and harm reduction, that's one thing. I just don't want to get into targeting certain populations of people and identifying them as bringing different risks or not to us. This is a good topic for us to vet at the Public Health Board meeting. And I think you're giving us the impetus to do that. And I think Desi Fleming, you're already expecting to do that, where we will vet this discussion there like we do for other things like HIV and hepatitis and other communicable diseases and so on. So that's the venue for it, but I'm okay with that. But I'm just uncomfortable when we start, in my lack of understanding, especially knowing who's the risk and where's the risk and who are the experts.
Mr. Chairman, so John, this is a little deja vu. If you can remember, this seems like it was the same conversation we had a while ago. But my main point is, if you knowingly are bringing people on purpose here that you know have a contagious disease, doesn't matter what race they are, that isn't good. That's not a good move on our part, and we are going to be held accountable. And it's not just the city commission, it's the federal government, the state government, and LSS. If you're knowingly, I agree, you have to be careful, but if we're intentionally bringing people that are, and public safety is one of our main accountability things, if we are bringing people on purpose that we know have a contagious disease, that's on us, and that's not good. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Strand?
Could I ask Ms. Fleming to come up for a second, please? I'm sorry, but you know, to my knowledge, they aren't knowingly bringing people in who are disease-ridden or bearing diseases. That's my sense of the vetting, especially with refugees. And it's my sense that isn't a risk to our community. I want to confirm it, though, or find out more. If you could help me understand this.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner
Please.
Strand. So they are tested, and they have very strict standards about not letting people with active TB disease come to this country. So it is screened. They're screened twice, in fact. They're screened before they leave their country of residence, and they're screened when they get to the United States within 30 days, again. And I think the thing we have to remember, too, is TB is a treatable disease. The reason you don't hear about it much in our area is because we have a really good system that works. And so if we do have active disease, it's all handled and it doesn't cause issues because they're being monitored, they're being treated. You know, if someone has active disease, they're being directly observed therapies. So we're watching them take medications to assure that they are not a risk to the public. So I think you have to be assured in knowing.
Isolation care when you're in the hospital, so sometimes it's a mistake you make if you catch it, basically.
Well, and we isolate at home. I mean, there are very stringent guidelines, so just know that we are being responsible for the public safety, and, you know, we treat latent TB. There's states in our country that don't treat latent disease. We do here, just so that we can prevent any occurrence of it going to active. And some people, may never in their lifetime convert to active. We don't know that, but we do treat latent disease here because of that. And we are having, our Board of Health meeting is February 15th at noon, and we would love for anybody to come. We're going to have the State Health Department come and talk about what their role is in TB management. We're going to have our local folks and how we work with the providers here. So it would be a great opportunity for people who have questions.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Gary,
Yes.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Pepcorn.
No.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Snow removal update. Commissioner Grunberg's seen a lot of cars in the ditch, so he wants to talk to Ben a little bit. How do we keep them out of the ditch?
Mr. Chairman, let me just do a segue into this. I live just off of 52nd Avenue South, and I work on 19th Avenue North. And this morning at 6:45, I left, and I-29 was fine until I got to 32nd Avenue South, and it was slick all the way to 19th Avenue. And in that 3 to 4 or 5 miles, there were 3 accidents. And I'm not an expert in this area, but to me, I thought we didn't put any of that material down until it was warm, certain temperatures. It was cold today. It's going to be cold all week, and I just wondered. So I called Ben and said, "Hey, what gives? Give us an update on snow removal." And by the way, I realize that's state highway, and it just seems to me that they're overdoing it at the state level, because when I left at 9 a.m. to go to Wapton for the day, there were 2 more accidents going south. So there's 5 accidents, in my opinion, that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't put that material on I-29, that could have been prevented based on a decision because it's too cold, but that's just me. So I wanted Ben to be the expert and say, here's what I think, and here's how it's going this year with snow removal.
Well, I'm hoping I'm the expert, but I can't vouch for that, so I'm hoping you'll understand where I'm coming from on this. So you bring up a great point. Liquids on roads is very delicate. It's a very in-depth process. A lot of testing has gone forward nationwide on this. And City of Fargo is very diligent in that we do not use liquids on our pavement once they reach 5 degrees and dropping. We are not going to do it. It's just, there's too much risk at fault. We don't know how it's going to react. The wind plays into effect, the pavement temperature, the air temperature, everything can change really fast. So we're not going to do it. We're not going to take the chance. State agency is a little different. Not saying that they are making different decisions, but at this point they're still choosing to use their liquids at different application rates, which they're also mixing in some additional chemicals as far as carbohydrates and their salt brine and stuff like that. So it's kind of pretty complex in how it works, but I can assure you the City of Fargo is not going to put any liquids on our roads when it's 5 degrees and dropping. And
So the interesting thing for the public to know is we all have temperatures in our car, the outside temperature. Ben and his team have probes in their cars that tell us what the temperature of the pavement is. That helps to make those decisions. So he's driving around all the time, not looking for lunch, trying to find out.
That's correct. Pavement temperature is what we watch. Pavement temperature is the important part in this. That and dew point. Dew point and pavement temperature, when they're meeting, that's when you see frost on the road or you see moisture coming on the road. So we watch pavement temperature. Air temperature can affect it a little bit, but not necessarily. It's really pavement temperature and wind. So we use chemicals, we do, and we go out there with liquids when we can. We're not putting anything at risk. My staff is very educated on this. We've all learned this process together. We've been studying it for at least 10 years, working on this together, and so that we understand how the chemistry works, because that's what you're doing. You're doing chemistry. You're doing salt brine, which is 23% salt. The rest is water. So what happens when you add that to your road surface and there's any snow on it, it can melt it, but it can also dilute out real fast and refreeze real quick, which then turns into black ice. So sometimes you can see that agencies will create black ice that's not visible on the road surface. It'll have so much of a sheen without them knowing it. So that's what we do. We have a lot of compaction on our roads right now. In Fargo, what we're using for 100% of our product right now is our sand salt mixture. It's too cold to use any other product out there. Salt only is good down to 15 degrees. Below that, we have another product called Ice Slicer that's mined out of Utah. It's really good. It goes down to about 5-10 if the sun is shining. Anything below that, 80% sand, 20% salt in there to keep it just flowable, and that's what we're putting on our streets right now.
Appreciate that. I mean, again, 52nd Avenue South all the way to Wapton, roads are beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's just,
New clean, didn't get attracted by the moisture.
And
I'm sure
because
there-
you use sand, we don't get any kickback from the car washes, right?
A lot of people would prefer that we stick with sand, but it's also a double-edged sword on that fact is, we also have to pick it up. It also has EPA ramifications to our rivers and going down the drains. It's just as bad as the salt is actually to our rivers and streams as the sand is. So we spend a lot of time educating, studying this, working with the Salt Institute, which is the right quantity to use and not overuse. Use the right quantity of everything that works the best. We've had a difficult winter so far, or since January. Up till January, we were really looking good. We haven't had a huge amount of snow. We're looking at about 26 inches of snow total, but it's all in Fargo. Everything blew into Fargo. So, great questions. I love to educate on this. I spend a lot of time educating with people in the public, invite them into Public Works to show them our chemicals, show them our products used, show them our guidelines that we use, because we have set guidelines that each of our supervisor follows to a T.
Commissioner Strand, you got a question?
Thank you, Mayor. More of a comment, and I've heard from 2 downtown businesses, and you've heard from them too, and I have to hand it to you. You know, you got folks who there's immense snow and they want to be able to access their front doors, and it's not always easy, but you not only answer their questions and go address their concerns, then you go talk to them. You know, that makes a world of difference when you have a public works director that's that engaged with people to go offer to meet with them and hear their concerns and look them in the eye and so on. So I want to thank you for your response to the folks I've heard from, because you've had a lot of snow downtown. I can't imagine how you're dealing with it.
If you want to take a look at it, it's real interesting. Our snow dump is now on 12th Avenue, west of the landfill. We are having to push it up with 2 dozers from the landfill just to keep up with the truckloads we're hauling in there. It is a very large pile and very interesting to look at. So we haul usually about 400 truckloads a night. We've hauled for a total of 14 days straight for 12 hours at the nighttime to get everything brought back from the 10-inch blizzard we had. Downtown, we struggled. New Year's, it was a bad timing. Everything came together perfectly. This last snow event, it went fairly well. Our goal is to get the downtown hauled in 2 nights. Streets one night, avenues the next, and we're out. And we were successful in that, and I think we have a plan in place, working with the DCP and some communication, and I think we're progressing nicely on some of these things.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm
I'm
I
open
don't think anybody
anytime.
got seriously hurt this morning, but it could have been a disaster with some of the traffic this morning on that icy spot.
It can go bad on you real quick, and so that's why we stay away from
The
it.
lesson then, Tony, is to stay on city streets because they're not as icy, is that?
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Okay, legislative update. Is this Mike, Bruce? Who's going to do this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. 2 weeks ago at the commission meeting, we kind of talked about what the commission might like to see, and as you recall, we've asked each department head, kind of serving as a subject matter expert in their area, to review all bills, and the submittal deadline is passed for both the House and the Senate, and I think the total was 907 bills introduced. So a lot of reading. But what we've done is we've asked each department head to pick out those bills that they would track because they serve as our subject matter expert, create their own separate tracking list by category, and then Kember would merge all those individual lists into one master list. And that's what we've, I think, twice now provided to commissioners. On that master tracking list, we've included the bill, obviously, a bill description, whether at the staff level we recommend supporting or opposing the bill and the reasons why. Commissioner Gehrig and I had a conversation earlier today, and he asked, would it be possible in cases where testimony is submitted on a bill to add a column to that tracking list so that you as commissioners could see whether testimony has been provided, and if you'd like to see that, request that, which in speaking with Kember, it sounds like we'll do that, and we'll get right on that.
Questions of the commission? The Senate did meet on Bill 2020 about the diversion funding, so we did go out there and discuss that with them, and that went as well as those go. Tony says we just have to wait. They're still working stuff, so they're trying to figure things out. We have had several members of our team go out there. In fact, Chief Todd's going out there tomorrow, did you say, Dave? You're going out there tomorrow, and Nicole is out there last week, and a variety of different people are going out there on different bills where our policy states one thing, and we support what their policy says, unless you have something different you want them to
With
say.
with the weather forecast like it is, we got to be a little bit careful that we aren't putting people in jeopardy. It's going to be as cold as I think I've seen it in my lifetime traveling out there, so you got to have a vehicle that you're going to be sure keeps running, because it is going to be cold like we haven't seen for some time, so.
Any questions?
Just remember, legislation's kind of like making sausage. It's the process you don't necessarily enjoy, but what comes out at the end is what matters.
Now, this is our last meeting here, John. You're not going to make a statement that the press, we can kind of record for infinity, that this is the last statement that came out of the chambers?
Well, gosh, thanks for putting me on I hope you all get to. I've had some visuals in this space that are terrific. You know, when we, a few weeks ago, had a full room for the Roosevelt neighborhood, and just to show that interest, to me, that's what this room is all about. Or I'll never forget when the Native American Commission brought the proposal to declare Indigenous Peoples Day, and the room full of the regalia and the folks from the tribes and the community and the response from the commission. You know, to me, those are the moments, the missing and Indigenous women efforts, you know, where they come here, or some of these topics that come to us as city folks, and the people meet in the City Hall chamber, and they show up in groups, and they're there. That's my favorite part, is the visual of the people that we serve and represent, and then coming to us and approaching us for good governance.
With the size of our new commission chambers, we'll be in trouble if they're standing room only.
Yeah, for sure.
Their motion to adjourn?
That's a move.
Is there- All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.